All right, welcome to another edition of Dear People of Earth. With me today, I have a true MIB, Michael Ian Black. He's out here with us. He's a big UFO guy. He follows along on UFO Twitter along with us.
And I follow you, and I listen to your podcast. And Dear People of Earth, to me, not only a great podcast, terrific title, by the way.
Thank you. You know, I wanted to come up with something a little catchy, something a little bit different. I am not, in fact, an alien.
Okay.
Although I've been called that a few times, but I have not. I'm not a real alien. But yeah, so I wanted to bring you on. I reached out to you. You said you had a lot of interest in coming on, so here we are. We're finally together.
I think you reached out, and I think I responded in about 3 minutes. Yeah,
it was very quick. Yep, it was very quick. There was no moss grown on that at all, so it was pretty cool. I enjoy that.
Well, you're one of my favorite new accounts to follow, and as I said, I listen to the podcast, and I have just been utterly intrigued by the things you have to say. I'm sorry, I'll wait for the siren.
It's funny, I just had one in my background too.
That was my background. I think it was me, and you were hearing through.
Oh, was it? Oh, all right.
Yeah. Apparently, there's a fire or something here in Savannah, Georgia. Yeah, I've been totally intrigued with the things you've had to say and the videos that you've seen and the source that you have and the whole thing. All of that with the caveat that I don't know whether to believe you or not, but I don't think you want me to believe you necessarily. I think you want me to not necessarily take you at your word.
Yep. I invite the total skepticism. I want questions asked. We don't move forward in this arena anyway, unless we get fact and truth, and that's the honest answer behind all of it. And as I've said before, I'm a hardline disclosure advocate. I want it out there. Yes, these things are here, and from there on, it's all details. At that point, is it
exactly
this or that or whatever? I'm not gonna. I have my own ideas, of course, but at the end of the day, I don't think any one of us, with the exception of maybe a very few, have all the answers. It's very compartmentalized for many, many, many years. And certain people know a lot more than other people. There were some recent interviews I know that Jeremy and George Knapp had out there, guy that was in charge of one of the governing boards that was overseeing ATIP. With Lou Elizondo. And, he made an admission that, yes, in fact, the United States do have craft that have been penetrated and we've seen inside and gone inside. I think that's been a lot of news that's been out there for many, many years. It's now coming to the point where it's incredibly difficult to deny these things much longer.
I thought there was something kind of startling about that interview, which was it's such a small thing, but it really struck me, the idea that we have this craft and we've been able to get inside of it, which implied to me that they really had to struggle to figure out how to get inside of it, which makes a lot of sense. How would you know how to open that door?
Right.
But just something simple like that gives a kind of inkling as to the what must be so perplexing and befuddling about the idea of interacting with a non-human intelligence. Just that tiny little detail made me sort of stop and go, yeah, of course. Like just getting inside the thing might be incredibly difficult. And then once you get in and you have no idea what you're looking at, it must be amazing.
Right. And one of the things that through my source and through others and through what I have heard, and I think Lou has said this, I think David Grush has said this, that the external part of these things, especially with the Tic Tac objects and the orb objects, it's a combination of a skin, right? Mm-hmm. It's not. It's not.
It's not like an airliner like we have,
right?
There's something biological.
There's something biologic to it, right? And I know that when I talked to my guy, they talked about trying to get into it. And every time they tried to get into it, it healed itself. So they can make the scratch, or they can make the scrape, or they can do this. But every time they tried to actually do something with it, it was only until they applied a field. And my understanding was there's a huge magnetic field that these things create. And he talked about applying fields to it that allowed it to get inside, to get inside. So there wasn't a specific quote-unquote door, per se, unless these things are able to somehow create a door or move a door, or it wasn't a door because the craft themselves, for all intents and purposes, are closed. They're completely and totally, there's no windows, there's no opening per se to get in and out of. That's why a lot of these are considered, especially with the orbs, they're considered to be autonomous. They're not, there's no people inside, well, quote unquote people. There's no biologics that are inside, whereas the larger ones do. If you look back, and some of the things that's always fascinated me is if you look back, let's say into the 40s and 50s, you're talking about discs, right? And you don't see quite as much of that anymore. You don't, one of the things that people have asked me is like, well, why were they discs in the past, but now we don't see discs? First of all, we do still see discs. People still see discs all the time. It's possible that you're talking about multiple intelligences that are out there. We don't know for certain. At least I don't know for certain. So maybe you're talking about different beings that are using and controlling different craft. It could be that one is more prevalent here now as opposed to 50 years ago, 60 years ago. I don't have that answer completely. But the short answer to that was that we still do see them. They're still part of the morphology of what these things are that are moving around in the sky. So,
well, presumably, and maybe
I lost you there on my end.
From the 40s and 50s don't necessarily look like cars from today, even though we still see cars from the 40s and 50s on the road. I don't know if that's a good analogy or not, but there's also the idea that, as you've just said, there could be different species using these.
It's certainly
that these craft end up becoming manifestations of what we project onto them.
Right. And that's another part of the whole situation, is that we've had this thing. One of the things that's difficult for me, because my mind works very much like technical, right? So for me personally, I have a hard time with the conscience side of it, even though if you speak to anybody that is dealing with this phenomenon, whether it's high up or other people that I've spoken with that haven't come out publicly, one of the main things that has been, kind of hand in hand with this is the consciousness aspect of it. You have some people that claim, and it's very hard to discredit this because I believe a lot of these folks do believe exactly what they're saying, that there is a consciousness with this, and that the manifestation of their consciousness along with these craft go hand in hand. And now we have others, like, for example, Ross Coulthard talks about this pretty extensively, and it's become more in the lexicon lately that there are more and more of these crafts that are attributed to either a calling or a consciousness or a definite, I want to say maybe after they've seen these things, that they've had a definite impact on their life and on how they feel about things that are moving through the world, and their consciousness connected to whether it's galaxy or universal. And in fact, Kevin Day, who I just interviewed, he was with the Nimitz Encounter Group, the Tic Tac, the big 2004 event. He was very, very affected by this. He even used it as an ontological shock discussion with me, that ever since this has happened to him, he's had, in Australia, they call it a walkabout. But what he did is he went into, basically into the woods and kind of just contemplated life and what this meant. And he's asked a lot of questions about that. And if you think about it, he's kind of a tertiary to an actual contact, because a lot of people have direct contact with orbs, tic tacs, other beings. And again, I have difficulty with it sometimes because my mind is very technical. I work towards the physics of things and being able to tacitly touch things. So it's difficult for me sometimes, but I have to remind myself that a lot of these people had that contact, that tacit contact. Oh, yeah. And, what is it? I don't understand that side of it as much. Sometimes you talk to people and you're like, but then there's other times where you gotta listen to them and you gotta hear what they're saying. And Kevin Day strikes me as someone who is just about as authentic as you can get. And when he tells you that there's been within him, he's had some type of consciousness and awakening, I think we have to listen to that, and we have to discover what that is.
Yeah, and I have heard those stories time and time again. And in fact, I think we might be slightly the opposite in this regard. I was always interested in UFOs from the time I was a kid. I don't know what sparked that interest. I mean, this is like pre-Star Wars. I don't know where that came from, but it was definitely like in my consciousness from the very beginning. And then I kind of fell out of it and got back into it in 2017, along with so many other people.
Right.
But between 2017 and, let's say, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I also started looking into near-death experiences and consciousness and the nature of reality. And all of those things tie, as we know, somehow to this phenomena, although I think everybody has a difficult time sort of capturing why and how exactly. There is certainly the consciousness aspect of it, but for me, there is also, I think, the deeper question of the kind of fundamental nature of reality itself. And my own ontological shock comes from, and it's something I think I'm still processing, comes from the idea that, or the recognition, I should say, that our human perception of the world is at very best, extremely limited. We're incapable of engaging with the kind of larger reality that we see hints of all the time. And we see hints of it in the UFO discussion, in the near-death experience conversations, in the sort of larger consciousness conversations. All of it seems to be pointing to something. And what it's pointing to, as far as I can tell, is a reimagining and new understanding of reality of a reality that we know is there but can't quite reach. That, to me, is what's so fascinating about this. I'm also very interested in the technical side of it, very interested in the kind of nuts and bolts aspect of it. But for me, the deeper I've gotten into it, the more I've realized the most compelling part of it to me is how this question dovetails with so many other questions and how all of that connects to the fundamental nature of reality, which I feel like as people, we haven't even scratched the surface of. That's what's so intriguing to me.
Well, and there was I have to go back and maybe I can find it and put it in the notes for this, but there was a person, and I touched on it very briefly, that was very recently concluded a study, near-death experiences. And one of the most fascinating things that really talked to me about it and was one of the things where, so let me back up a little bit. A lot of times, near-death experiences are attributable to activity in the brain when one is going through the process of dying. And that was for a very long time just sort of the pat answer that there's no real life after death. It's your brain shutting down. And but his study directly refuted, and he has papers and documentation that some of these near-death experiences that he was talking about, when they went back and they talked about brain death and consciousness, came after the actual electrical impulses from the brain stopped. And then they were still working on the person. They were still trying to do that. And they brought them back up, and they actually spoke about the things that were occurring to them, people talking around them, consciousness of understanding things, and they couldn't bring it back with them, because when they were brought back to life, some of those things were no longer there. The knowledge was no longer there. So I found that to be very interesting and very credible, because there's just reams and reams and reams of paperwork about that. Boy, I'm old. I'm talking about reams of paperwork. But
megabytes, terabytes of information.
There's just bytes of information out there. So I found that to be incredibly intriguing. And another part of it is there was a psychologist who has since passed on, who did this tremendous amount of work on experiencers. And one of the things that he did when he cataloged all of his work is he didn't tell the experiencers.
This is John Mack or somebody else?
I think it's John Mack. Yeah.
Okay.
So he was talking about, to his clientele or to his experiencers that he was discussing, he never told them all the same thing. Like, he didn't go into a situation and say, well, Bill over there had this, and this happen. He actually just went into the situations blind. And what he found was there were many, many, not coincidences, but actually just verifiably discussed the same phenomenon, the same things over and over and over and over again. And it was overwhelming to look at that. So you have to think of two things. Either he was making the whole thing up, which he has video recordings of these people, or they all experienced something. So that in and of itself is from the consciousness point of view, what is going on? There's something with this phenomenon that is, to me, relatable to everything that's going on around us. And I think you're right. We haven't scratched the surface. And like I said, for me, it's difficult for me to get past it because I'm such a literal person at times, but I'm learning as I go along to accept, maybe not even accept, but at least listen to those things and try and have some more understanding about it. I think that's so
important. I think it is important to recognize with the experiencers, of which I am certainly not, that regardless of the cause, and I think this is what John Mack was getting at, regardless of the cause, these people have undeniably experienced something profound, sometimes profoundly terrifying, sometimes profoundly enlightening. And the same is true with the near-death experiencers. Something is occurring, and they may be related, they may not be. It may be that there's something that happens in the brain under difficult or peculiar circumstances where the brain does something and creates a kind of hyper reality where you're experiencing these things. But it doesn't quite add up for the reason that you said, which is that they're all experiencing not always the same, but very similar things that either have some kind of basis in their actual lived reality, or there is something deep in our brain that will generate these kinds of circumstances or these kinds of narratives. And so when you report back on it, you're going to report back on the same kinds of narratives, regardless of the reason. It's fascinating and deserves to be studied in depth, regardless of what is behind all of this. It just points to the fact that we don't have clue one about consciousness. And that itself is fascinating. Like, the questions to me are far more fascinating than any answers I feel like you can come up with. The questions only continue to populate. As soon as you resolve something, 10 questions pop up in their stead. And that to me is the joy of this field. That to me is the joy of this mystery, because we know there's something there and we don't have any idea what it is. And that to me is just like endlessly fascinating.
It is, because, and you're right. And it's the same, whether you're talking consciousness or UAP physicality, UFO physicality. The second you ask one question and you get an answer, there's so many more questions that you go, well, okay, so I gained entrance into this UFO. Mm-hmm. And every time I put something to it, it closed itself. Mm-hmm. Put a spectrometer to it, and we can't read it because we don't even have the knowledge as to what it could be. So it comes up anomalous. It comes up as something like question mark, that question mark in the universe that we just saw from the James Webb telescope. Well, why is there a big question mark? Well, we don't freaking know. We don't know. Someone's sending us a message going, hey,
it's an artifact in the code. Clearly,
it's a glitch in the matrix. But it's funny how sometimes, I kind of just came up with this, how Hollywood kind of mirrors or even predicts, and science fiction predicts these things. It's like, do these people at some point have knowledge that we like? It blows me away. It's like, oh my God, you look at Spielberg and some of his work with E.T., and you look at some of the work with
Close Encounters.
Yeah, it's like it's so dead on to what we think the reality might be, and the more and more we go along, like I know, and he had Jacques Vallée was one of his big advisors, and so was what's his name, that Project Blue Book, I don't know, the brain's not working, but Alan Hynek, who was even in the movie. I mean, obviously he's getting his information from somewhere. Something that fascinated me about Hynek was he went into the whole thing a total skeptic and came out a believer. Yeah. That fascinates me.
I feel like that was true with Elizondo too, or Elizondo was agnostic about it, didn't have an opinion one way or the other.
Right.
And I feel like the same has been true, at least with what Grush was saying. I don't feel like Grush had any particular opinion about it when he went into it.
Yeah, I agree.
And in fact, it seems like if you have an opinion about it, you're not going to be allowed into those programs. If you come in with a bias, one way or the other, you're probably not going to be allowed.
No, you're exactly right. I think if you go into it, if I were to go into it with my belief system now, especially now over the past 6 months, I probably wouldn't be able to be allowed to do that. Right. I imagine they give. I find both of those men to be very sober individuals. Right. Mm-hmm. I find both of those men to be thoughtful, incredibly intelligent, well-meaning, of course, but I also, I have a strong believability for both of those men. Mm-hmm. There's certainly times where you'll see out in the field, there's a lot of, you get a grifter, you're this, you're that, whatever. That's fine. But I believe that their end game is as well disclosure, as a whole. We talk about Lou, and I know that he has something coming out soon. And I believe that you're going to see something that is going to end up being something that can't be disproven.
And is it something you've seen?
I have not personally seen it. Heard things about it. I don't want to get into whom I talk to behind the scenes, but we do have a network behind the scenes that we discuss things. Certain individuals, and again, I don't want to name names, but they're, from the top down. I've been lucky enough to be included in some of that. Some of that I'm not included in, but some of it I am. And there's been some pretty cool things that I believe are going to come out. Again, I don't have all of the picture of it. I don't have 100% of it. I have some of it. And with some of the people, like I just recently had a about a 3.5 week discussion back and forth with somebody adjacent to Arrow. And one of the things that we have been discussing was that, and this is tough for me to say, is that Kirkpatrick is really not being treated fairly by the community. And the reason for that is because, so Arrow was set up as supposed to be a dissemination house, right? It's supposed to be an investigative arm of the Department of Defense. It's less that and more of a clearinghouse for information. It is correct that when, and I know for a fact that Kirkpatrick does not do all the interviews, but there are people within the organization that conduct these interviews. And I know it's come out a few times that it felt like people that were discussing things, they barely wrote anything down on a piece of paper. It didn't feel like an investigation. It felt like a platitude. It felt like they were placating us. And I have a little of information on that. And the idea is that though these people are telling this information, there's nothing new. It's well known. BB talks to CC and says, I was part of a reverse engineering program. We looked at the lasers and we looked at the skin of the craft. They already know. It's not anything that they're telling them new. But I have understood part of what has occurred is that they are vehemently opposed to them talking about it in a certain respect. And they are reminded that they are still under NDAs and that they are under the umbrella of the DOD, and that it's not going to be discussed. You're not going to tell that. And whether they are, I doubt this is true, but I was told that some of them have been told that this is a campaign that is slow. It's moving in a certain direction. Now, I don't know if all of them are told that, or if maybe the people that are currently still working on these programs are told that. I don't have that answer. I can infer from the context of what has been told to me, but I can't come out there and say for certain that that's what's occurring. But I can say that what is occurring from inside the person that I have spoken with is that there's no new news coming from these people. It's all known. It's DOD.
If it's all known, and if Arrow is saying it's all known on one hand, on the other hand, they're saying we don't have any evidence of anything extraterrestrial. So it's hard for me to reconcile those two statements and the statement that Kirkpatrick is being given a hard time because he's lying. I mean, if what you're saying is true, then Kirkpatrick is lying.
And there are many, many people out there. So guys like Lou will probably not come out. Well, Grush did say he must be mistaken, which was a nice way of saying you're lying. That was after that bizarre thing that came out on Indeed. He not Indeed, LinkedIn. To put out a statement like that, and you know what I'm talking about, right? That statement. I do expect somebody to defend their team. I think that's the right thing to do. But it was just a bizarre way of doing it. Like it seemed. It
was very prickly and very self-defensive in a way that didn't need to be. And he didn't need to say anything, really.
Right. He didn't owe an explanation to anybody. It was just kind of like one of those things. I know he's called Dr. K by the people that are inside. And they have at least the person that I spoke to has a very high view of Dr. K. Likes him, says he's not disingenuous, but that there are, and as this was told to me multiple times, there are bigger fish. Meaning he's not, even though, he has a boss, a direct boss that oversees that. Arrow is not and was never meant to be the arm of disclosure. It was meant to be a quote unquote investigative arm. The problem is that the investigations are known. Now, whether these special access projects are all known to him and team, I don't have that information. I can just say that, and if you talk or if you listen to anything about, what Ross Coulthard says, and he is very plugged in. He's lying. He doesn't have a choice on the matter.
Well, that's the other aspect of it. He very well may have good reasons for lying. I don't know what those are, but I can certainly see 5 years from now when we look back and we go, okay, well, that makes sense. We understand now why Kirkpatrick was in the impossible position he was in. He couldn't say, yes, we have these things because of X, Y, and Z. I just want to get to that point. I just want to understand this moment. Of course,
Right.
5 years from now, we'll be bitching about something else and saying, well, okay, well, we have disclosure, but the Zeta Reticulites, what do they want? It's
Right.
like,
And that's, that's part of it. And one of the things that, if you go back and you listen to Lou, and I harped on this with this person, could not get a straight answer. But you have to read between the lines with some of this stuff. Lou was talking on a podcast, and he was talking about the possibility that the acknowledgement of these beings could trigger an event, right?
Right.
So then you have to ask yourself, is there something, and I don't have this answer. This is simply a question that I'm asking. Is there something behind the scenes that once it's acknowledged and we know about it as, let's say, allies, because there are certainly other countries that are involved in this as well. Is there something that they know that when it's triggered, or rather when it is fully out there and it is fully acknowledged, was it a trigger for something? And we can't answer that question until we know the full, reality of what's going on. Does it trigger a war? I don't know. Does it trigger humanity's capture? I'm obviously speculating here. It's a wild speculation, but I don't know. And when you listen to people that know, and they tell you things like it's going to be somber or it's going to be not what you think it is, I think you got to listen and look between the lines of what they're trying to say. So there has been times that I sat there and I've thought to myself, do I want to keep pushing this? Because I've moved up a little bit in this. Do we want to keep pushing this? Is there a reason why we should stop? And the long and the short answer ends up always being, if I have cancer, do I want to know? Do I want my doctor to tell me you're fine? Or do I want to know and make my plans and do what I have to do?
But then there's the question of, what if going to the doctor triggers your cancer?
Right.
What if you don't have cancer until you go to that doctor to see what's wrong? That's a legitimate. Yeah, it's scary. At the same time, I understand that you're a hard D disclosure guy. I feel like Lou is a hard D disclosure guy. I mean, he's certainly done everything that he can. Christopher Mellon seems like that too. So these are people who, and yourself included, who seem certainly a lot more plugged in than I am. And those people are advocating for disclosure. I know, just as an ethical choice for me personally, I'm the same as you. Like, I want to know if there's bad news, just tell me the bad news.
Tell me.
If it's, on the other hand, if you could convince me, and nobody has been able to this point, that acknowledging the existence of something creates some sort of negative consequence, okay, then I guess I understand that. But even still, I just feel like as a species, we have a kind of fundamental right to know the world that we're living in. It almost seems bizarre that anybody would argue otherwise. We, as a species, our whole gig is finding shit out. Like, that's all we do.
Right.
Nothing is going to stop us from raising questions and trying to answer them. This is one of the most profound questions we could possibly have. I don't see anything getting in the way of us trying to figure out what the answers are, if the answers are knowable, and maybe they're not.
Well, therein lies part of the question. Is it knowable, right? Like, so one of the things that I talked about with, and again, this is all recent stuff, but we talked about interdimensionality. We talked about Einstein-Rosen bridges. We talked about the technical and the physics aspect of it. And the answer that I got back was, it's not nearly what you think it is. It's not quite, like, that's not though they are using and utilizing some of the concepts that humans have come up with, it may not be quite what you think it is. And I couldn't really get much more out of it. Whether this person...
And was this person, was he speaking from speculation or knowledge?
No, speaking from knowledge, but also partially speculation. So this person didn't know the full answer as to what the Enigma and the phenomenon is, but they can tell you, for example, I specifically talked about interdimensionality. And the answer came back to me that they're not interdimensional, that there is an aspect of that, but that's not where they reside. Like it's not their normal place of being. It's simply a mechanism and a tool. That's all it is. Simply, like, for example, like we use electricity, right? And it's a tool. It's not where we reside. It's a force, but it's not where we reside. And it's the same thing with if you look at gravity. Now, gravity, I can get deep into the physics. I won't go down that road. But if you look at it and you look at the four forces of nature and the universe, we don't know what it all is, right? I talked about previously, we talked about one of the missions to Psychos that's going on right now that NASA is going up there. If they were able to pull that thing in here, right? If they were able to pull that thing to Earth, it would collapse the Earth's economy because there's so much gold, there's so much metal that it would literally, like, you could give every man, woman, and child on the planet 100 pounds of gold, like you could just, or more, right? So, it's like we don't know everything that's going on, and this thing's, I mean, if this thing's close enough for us to travel to, right, and land on, and take pictures and samples, that's in our galactic background, right, or backyard. Consider the entirety of the universe. Just forget the universe. Consider the entire
galaxy.
The galaxy, right? We just don't have all the answers. We don't even know that we have all of the right elements yet, right? We posit that there are elements that are out there that we've never discovered. Other heavy elements, right? So now you start talking about heavy elements, you're talking about nuclear force elements, right? You know, if we have access to those, what are we going to be able to do with them? We don't know. Is you know, you talk about Lazar. Now, I'm not a huge Bob Lazar. I have problems there. There's things in his background that make me pause. So but let's just go on that thought, right? Let's say he has element 115. What the hell is element 115? Is it an element that allows this type of travel? Is it on a rock that we're going to find in 5 years, 10 years? Do we already know about it and we're not putting it out there? So that's why when I say we talk about all of these things that are occurring within this space, there's so much that we don't know about in our own backyard. For us to say it isn't this or it is this, we just can't answer that question yet. But getting back to what I was talking about with him. So the biggest concern is that it's not quite what UFO Twitter is thinking. Even he told me I had a lot of the tech right. I had pretty much all the NHI stuff completely wrong. And did
he say how you got it wrong? Like, did he clarify?
Yeah. So the small gray beings are almost like a guarantee. Like that they're there. He said more than likely some of my conclusions for them are correct in that there are a couple things. Number one, they're, I guess, ambivalent at best. They do have a job to do. Part of it has to do with a technological point of view with humanity. Did not get much further than that. But that the main element is supposed to look just like you and me. That you wouldn't know. If he stood next to you, you'd have no idea. And I talked about with the interdimensionality of that, remember? Because one of the things that I kind of posited and talked about when I talked to my first contact was that these beings could be interdimensional, standing next to you, and you wouldn't even know that they were there. He said that's not how it works. That and so from that respect, from the NHI respect, that was probably incorrect. So again, I'm willing to, as I go along and I learn things and I speak to people, I am 100% willing to adjust and rethink what it is that is out there.
Did you ask this question? If you're standing next to one of them and you wouldn't know, do they know? Do they know that they are an NHI?
So we didn't get deep into that, and that's a good question that I should have asked, and I did not. I think at that point I was just kind of like in a little bit of like disbelief about that particular revelation. And one of the follow-ups I did say was, well, do they have different features? And he says, no, it's literally like you can stand next to them. And my understanding from what he's talking about is the oceans are full to a certain extent. And we talked about that, which is what triggered, I accidentally sent you that, what do you call it? The
FOIA request.
The FOIA request. I specifically asked, because I haven't seen it before, about underwater underwater. What is it? UHI. Submersible.
UAS.
USOs. And they put through a All right, so I may have to go to a different route here. It looks like my my laptop is trying to do an automatic update, which I was unaware of.
Oh, I see.
So now I'm on my phone. So I guess it'll just re-record, and I'll just have to put them together afterward. Technical difficulties are awesome.
The best.
So, one of the things that we were discussing and what we were talking about was those beings being able to be essentially right next to you, and you wouldn't be able to tell what they were. Not that they didn't look human, but that you wouldn't know that they were from any place else. And one of the things that he was very adamant about, let me just adjust this a little bit more, is that they came from somewhere else, but many of them are native right here to where we are now.
In other words, they originally came here from someplace else, but have settled here the way Europeans colonized America.
Exactly.
And they've been here for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
So my understanding is, and I don't know if it's that particular species has been here longer than humanity. There's something.
And are we a product of them?
Didn't get into
is the reason that is the reason that we're indistinguishable is because not so much that they look like us, but we look like them?
Don't know. And he did not have that answer for me. That I did ask. I asked about engineering, and I asked about human origins. Yeah, and it wasn't part of the. We didn't get into it. It wasn't something that I don't know if he had knowledge of it, to be honest with you. So I did ask, and we were on text. There were no phone conversations or anything like that. So it's very hard to infer things when you're texting people. So I did try and get those answered. Now, one of the questions asked was, am I certain that this person was telling me the truth? All I can tell you is that I found this person through some of my investigations. So when I reached out to this person, I know I was reaching out to this person directly. I can't tell you if I'm part of a psyop. I can't tell you if he was telling me lies about everything. One of the things that I have said from the beginning is that I can only tell you what was told to me. I can make speculation. I can certainly infer from context and read between the lines with some things. But again, I had difficulty with it because I felt like it was kind of a love letter to Kirkpatrick, and I'm not thrilled about that part of it. But again, and I had a lot of difficulty whether or not I was going to write that story and talk about this at all. Very reticent because some of it felt like it was being fed to me, like I was just a useful idiot. So I was kind of like, like, do I do this or do I just let it go and not say anything? And I said something about it, and then the next thing you know, I needed to get it out there. So, you know, that part.
Yeah, I read that piece. And you were careful to say, "Look, I don't know. I don't know if this guy's telling me the truth or not." But here it is. This is the conversation that we had, and I think that's all you can do as a diligent investigator is to report on what somebody told you without necessarily saying this is true.
Oh, please tell me
you don't know if it's true.
again.
Oh, am I frozen again?
Yeah, you froze up, but I can hear you.
Okay. We don't. The more information and the more data points that can be out there, the better, because they can either be corroborated or disproven by other people. And, you know, in those contradictions, we may find truth.
Right. And, you know, there's a lot of different speculation out there about the, like, you know, we've talked about this, but the consciousness with the whole thing. And, if I bring it back a little bit, so the orb photo that I had, that was brought to me by my friend Juan, who the picture was taken by someone that he met on a trip. So this guy Fernando and Juan went away for 2 weeks, so I haven't been able, because he needs to do some translation for me when we talk to Fernando. Fernando does speak good English. But it's not perfect, and there's some things that get lost in translation. So,
and he's Peruvian. Do I have that right?
So he is Brazilian.
Brazilian,
but this was taken over the rainforest in Ecuador, Ecuadorian rainforest. So, what happened was here's exactly how it happened. He had his iPhone, boom, 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 taking pictures here, boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Just taking some pictures. He didn't even know until after he looked at the photos. He goes, "What the hell is that?" And then he opened it up, and there it was. And then subsequently, we put it out there. People are like, "That's a butterfly." Like, at first, I looked at it. I was like, "There's no way," because you can tell it's far away. But then the more I looked at it, the more I got a little scared. I was like, I'm going to look like an idiot because this is a butterfly. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I looked at it and I went, oh, shit. This is a fucking butterfly. Excuse my French. I'm like, this is a butterfly. And I put this out there as an orb. And then the person that I had looking at it, he is like this technical just genius. Like he builds entire systems that are like off-grid systems for connectivity across the world. Like, this guy is just freaking brilliant. And one of the things that he has to do is he does all this three-dimensional rendering, right? He does all these things that are, hold on. What? Oh, I know. My wife has the cat. So he does all of these things and he renders all of these objects. And basically he was able to say, you know, this thing's big. Number one. Number two, it's way out there. It's you know, caught something on there that's pretty wild. So of all that, it's been, you know, one of these things that has been very cool. And now it's been shown to another person who is a PhD. I have to be careful here with what I give away, but this person said it's the exact same thing that they've seen before. Like, it was, I can't go too deep with it because he's still under an NDA, but it's consistent with what he has seen and worked with in the past. Let me put it that way. So that's brand new. Like, I just found that out today. Hopefully I'll be able to put some more information out there. Juan was the one that got the information for me, my kind of partner in crime. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that he's going to be able to put more of that information out there and allow me to get that out there. But for right now, I can't. I want to scream it out and say, you know, there was a confirmation of this from somebody. So we'll get more into that. But yeah, so one of the other things with Fernando, and again, back to the consciousness thing, is that he was affected very deeply by this as well. And he's, again, I'm going to let him tell his story. And that is coming up soon. But I want him to be able to tell you how it affected him personally, how it is continuing to affect him. He's an interesting dude. He's a very interesting guy. I think everybody's going to like him quite a bit, actually. He's a good dude.
Yeah, it's interesting. The deeper I get into it, the less interested I become in sightings,
Mhm.
triangle sightings, mantis sightings, orbs, whatever. It's like, okay, yeah, I know. Like they're out there. Like I know. Like,
Yeah.
ultimately, what your photo is doing and what the Tic Tac video is doing and what everything else is doing is basically just trying to convince an unconvinced population that this is a real thing. I'm already past that.
Right.
So, um, like I did find that photo really cool and intriguing. And if it came back and it was a butterfly, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. Like that doesn't disprove anything in the fact that what you're saying is it's absolutely not a butterfly. It's a huge metal fucking thing. Okay, like I can accept that just as easily as it being a butterfly because I'm already past that point.
I'll tell you, I was freaking out. I'm not going to lie to you. I was freaking out. I was like,
Well, it's different when it's your reputation.
I was like, oh my
That's a
God.
different thing.
I was like,
Of
this
course.
is a fucking butterfly, and I'm going to look like a buffoon. I'm like, oh God. Bang up job,
Well,
dude. I was like, oh God.
I think it's important. I think it's important to be able to be wrong.
That it is what it is, and that it was caught the way it was caught, which is pretty wild. When you consider how quickly, right, and we have the photo before and the photo after, and I have all the metadata.
Oh, right. That's what I wanted to ask.
That fast. It was that fast. It was there. It was in through wherever or whatever it was doing. It didn't go up. It didn't go down. It didn't go left. It didn't go right because he would have caught it. He would have seen it.
It was in and out.
It was there doing whatever it did in a fraction of a second, and then it was gone. So that's another reason why I know it's not a butterfly, because I do trust I trust him. I trusted his words then, but I trusted the data more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have the data, and I put that data through basically the same type of forensic data examination that police use all over the world, right, with Griffi. And I actually had to have them do it because I was not allowed access to Griffi itself, because it has a lot of NCIC data and like data that it looks at other metadata throughout the internet and searches for things, and I don't have the authority to use that. You have to be a law enforcement to get access to that type of stuff.
Oh, interesting. So what you're saying is they can look at the metadata from that photo and then correlate that with other metadata of things that are occurring all over the world.
Correct.
On the web.
Correct.
Amazing.
Yeah. And they confirm that, in fact, that metadata, and it will also tell you if the metadata has been manipulated, right? Because they are law enforcement, they have agreements with Apple and Samsung and everything else, so that, if you were to put it on the internet and you played with it, you can put it through Photoshop and you can play with the metadata, right? And most people would never know that it's been played with. But when you put it through this software and they do it, they have agreements with all of these companies across the world, with all the manufacturers, not some in China, but, your normal based smartphones and cameras and stuff like that. So they'll give them that data that says, okay, these ones and zeros were manipulated, so it's not, the metadata is wrong, and it's admissible in a court of law. So it was important for me to get that part of it, and then the second part of it was to get, the what they call the it's not luminosity, it's not luminosity, it's like lumiticity or something like that, and things that I didn't understand. I mean, it was a little over my head, but you could tell, like, as you look through the picture, and any time that you look at a photograph, you can tell, you bring it in, you look at the lumiticity, and you can see above if the colors are consistent above and the colors are consistent below, and you do color sampling on the rear of the picture, the front of the picture, and then the middle of the picture. And if that lumiticity is different, it means two things. Either the object was placed there in the picture, separate, so it could be you could literally digitally create the object. Or if the lumiticity is correct below and so above, and it is on the object itself, the lumiticity back and forth is the same, then that means that object is in the middle ground, which is where it was taken. It was in the middle ground.
Right.
It wasn't in the foreground. It wasn't in the aft. It was definitely in the middle, which makes that object huge, like really big. So that in and of itself, I thought was a very cool thing. But it looks like we're now going to get even more evidentiary based and some more testimony, if I can get him to talk about it, about the actual object itself being something that has been seen before, and seen many, many, many years ago. We're talking maybe 25 to 30. So that in and of itself is pretty cool. But I wanted to also switch gears and talk about a couple other things. One, your thoughts on the Schumer Amendment.
I'm no expert on legislation, so I know that there is some controversy about it.
Mm-hmm.
On the surface, to me, it looked like this is an amazing, historic, and groundbreaking piece of legislation. Here is, let's call him the second most powerful Democrat in the country, with input from the first most powerful Democrat, the president or his office, using those words, non-human intelligence, using, talking about craft and the reverse engineering programs and all of this stuff, like just putting it right there into the language. That alone, to me, was just kind of stunning and seemed to point to some larger plan underway. We keep hearing there is a kind of timeline that has been established and that is being followed. But that seemed to me to be the first concrete evidence that I could look at and go, maybe there is something to this timeline being followed. Maybe there are benevolent gear pullers in the background trying to lay this out in a way that the American population and the global population will be able to digest it in a sober and responsible way. That was my initial take on it. And I know some people are saying the legislation doesn't go far enough, or it doesn't do X, or it doesn't do Y. I don't know. I'm no lawyer. But on the surface, it was a kind of stunning document to look at.
On the surface, I believe it's probably one of the most explosive pieces of legislation in this arena that has ever occurred. Not one, it is the most. It does have, there's two things in it that give me, I guess the right word would be hope. And one is that there is going to be a group that oversees whatever dissemination occurs because of this legislation. That's one. That gives me hope that one person alone can't just make a decision, right? It can't be just one person that says, no, we're not going to let this out. But then there's a little bit that goes up to the president, right? And the president can then classify certain aspects of it. That comes down to being, again, politics, right? Now, whether it's Trump in the White House, whether it's Biden in the White House, whether it's whoever in the White House, that person will have a final say on what gets out. That's a little bit concerning because to me, that's an out, right? But it also, if you read it, it also makes, and again, I'm not an attorney either, but it makes provisions that as long as it does not directly affect the I think they use sovereignty of, I'm trying to remember this back, the sovereignty of, as well as the national security of the United States, that even the president can't stop it. It has to come out. Right? That's what the legislation says. So in that respect, that's very encouraging to me. Now, you also have to go back and you have to look at the trail, right? I talk about the investigation of, and this is like this is what I love doing is linking and finding things. So if we go back, right, and we look at where this came from, Schumer was big with who? Harry Reid. Harry Reid, before he died, was a disclosure advocate, right? A big disclosure advocate. And part of this, if you look at connections, right, and you go back and you look at Hillary Clinton and you look at the Rockefellers, right, there are weird little signs in that whole thing. Like there's a great picture of a young Hillary Clinton walking with the Rockefellers. And in her book, in her hands is a book about disclosure, right? And it's like you've got all these weird things that are coming together. And, you know,
Well, in her relationship with Podesta later
and
on,
Podesta
obviously.
later on, right? And Podesta, we know, I know, is deep into this, and he's deep
Mm-hmm.
into the now when President Biden pulled him up to be part of the energy, department. All of that's
Mm-hmm.
all connected. Like it's all
Mm-hmm.
there. Like, can you make a direct connection? Like if this was all hearsay, could you make a direct connection and say this, and this? No, there's no smoking guns there for the most part. What exists is all hearsay, but it's all evidentiary hearsay. Like you can put hearsay in a court of law. It happens all the time. But is that hearsay strong enough evidence to say this is this? And it isn't. It just isn't.
Well,
It's
what you
interesting.
do have, what the evidence that you do have, though, is what precipitated this question, which is this piece of legislation.
Right.
This piece of legislation doesn't come out in a vacuum.
No.
There's no reason for it to come out. There's no reason for Schumer to write this legislation.
None.
Or to be involved in this legislation and to put his imprimatur on it.
Right.
Why would he do that? And
It's
that's to me, that's a very profound question. Like you can look at Burchett and Luna and whoever on the Republican side and go, well, they have nothing to really lose here by pursuing this. They're kind of fringy Republican members of Congress who, sort of have a reputation as one thing, and they're interested in this thing. Okay. But for Schumer to get up there, a guy with 40 plus years of service, who is, as I said, the second most powerful Democrat in the country, leading the charge on this.
It's incredible.
Why? Incredible. Why? That's the thing. And you can go, okay, well, as it's not as a tip of the hat to Harry Reid. You can understand that from sentimental point of view, like he was close to Reid and Reid wanted this. But for Schumer to get in front of cameras and talk about this and work with the White House to craft this, and it's clearly carefully crafted, something is going on. So what is that thing? I mean, the obvious answer is, well, disclosure. Obviously, they're gearing up for some kind of disclosure. But is the obvious answer the correct answer? I don't know. Or is it a feint? Is it like he's putting this legislation out there, not for the American media to consume, but for the Russian and the Chinese media to consume? I don't know. I have no idea.
It's, you know what? Nothing would surprise me because, well, let's address the Chinese and the Russian thing, because I think it's a good question. I don't think that's it. It's certainly apropos right now to ask that question with what's going on world events. I don't think that's it. I think it was carefully crafted in such a way that it was deliberate in that manner. So I really do believe that there is a concerted disclosure event that's occurring. And I have to go back and I have to think about as a piece everything together. And I look at Lou's role, right? And I look at Elizon, I look at Grush's role, which I think was a wild card, by the way.
I think so too. That's the impression I get as well.
That came out. That came out of the blue.
He was a black swan.
I don't think that was supposed to happen. Lou, I think, and I can't prove this. So Lou, I know you might be listening, so don't take this the wrong way. I think Lou is an arm of disclosure. I believe that he is out there for a reason. I think he was probably absolutely correct and truthful when he said he was very disgusted with what he was hitting and the walls he was hitting. But as I've spoken to a very big journalist in this space, My understanding was that there were, and there are, and remain to be people behind the scenes, especially within Washington, that are good people that want this out, that don't believe that this is just a quote unquote national security issue. I don't believe, and again, we talked about this a little bit, but we talked about is this going to trigger something? I personally don't believe that that's the case. I don't think it's going to trigger anything. It's a speculation. We can read between the lines on certain things as people talk about them. But me personally, when I look at everything, and you are correct when you say, there are people out there that are in the know, like Chris Mellon, for example, that are still advocating for disclosure and probably know tremendous amounts more information than they're putting out there. For whatever reason, they cannot. Obviously, Chris Mellon was deep into the military aspect of this and the intelligence aspect of this. So these people are still under their NDAs. I mean, they can go to jail for this. Make no mistake about it. They can go to jail. They can have their lives completely ruined. If it comes from a treason point of view, you can be shot for treason. I mean, I don't think it's happened too much lately, but it can happen. So that there are reasons why some of these people have to be kind of beat around the bush. And I think it's an interesting string to pull on, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
I think the narrative around disclosure is that ultimately it has to come from the government, but then there are other sort of parallel narratives that are trying very hard to not rely on the government. Avi Loeb, for example, and the Galileo Project, or what you're doing, or I want to say what Lou's doing, but I don't know. I don't know how tied he is to the government or not. But let's say somebody comes out with a book, and in the book there are photos, or there's sort of undeniable corroborating evidence. Anything's deniable, but there's pretty good evidence at that point. Is it disclosure? I mean, does disclosure by definition have to come from a governmental agency?
No. I think it has to get to the point, and I think that this is part of the plan in place, is that it's going to come from citizen journalism, and it's going to come from a smoking gun somewhere outside of but adjacent to the federal government. Now, we could have it ripped off in another country, right? But I don't think that that's happening. I think that there is a coordinated effort. At one point, I also had talked to somebody else that was informing other governments. They weren't informing other governments, but there was scuttlebutt that there was behind the scenes things going on of the United States contacting countries that might not necessarily be in the know, that something is going to come. I don't know what the words are. I don't know what that discussion was. It was scuttlebutt, but it made sense at the time that this person was talking about it. There might be,
there was a Five Eyes conference about this as well, right?
I mean, as disclosure with the big D, I still remain that disclosure, at least with the little d, has occurred. When you have, when you have sitting senators, sitting United States senators, and sitting United States congresspeople saying, we are not alone. And it's not one that said it. It wasn't just Burchett or Burchett that said it. It was, I don't know that Luna said it, but I know that Moskowitz said it, and he also put up on his Twitter account, disclosure is coming. When you have senators that are saying it, when you have a person like like you said, the second highest ranking Democrat in the United States is putting out this explosive document and this explosive piece of legislation, which, by the way, is the second piece, because the first part came with the whistleblower protection, right? So there's two pieces now that have come out. It's not just one. There's a whistleblower protection specifically about reverse engineering with respect to non-human intelligence, and so that's two pieces of legislation that have occurred. That's huge. Why the mainstream media, and I believe there's probably a part of this that is coordinated that way. Why this isn't on the front page of every periodical and every TV show it blows my mind. It is the biggest question that we have to answer, and it's being answered, right? Why is this not? The obvious question is because there's been a very good job over the years of discrediting this field and discrediting people in this field and making them look like idiots. They've done a masterful job. I've always been told, or I've always been asked this question, well, if they're out there, right, well, why don't we know about them? I'm like, all you have to do is like pick up a book and look. They're there. Like it's
just Google.
It's Google. It's like the worst kept secret in history. What they've done good or what they've done well is they've made people look foolish. That's what they've done well. They haven't kept this stuff in. They've done a piss poor job at keeping it in. Really, it's
which is kind of why I'm reluctant to dismiss Bob Lazar, because Bob Lazar is sort of an early disclosure guy.
Yep.
And the knock on him was all the things that we can talk about. But at the same time, you go, all right, but doesn't the sort of discrediting of Lazar follow the exact pattern of the discrediting of everybody else? I mean, something was going on with Lazar.
Oh yeah.
Whether he was a useful idiot, like some people speculate, or whether what he is reporting is totally true, I don't know. But it's hard for me to totally discredit the guy. He's remained consistent over the years. He doesn't. He's not a grifter. He's not trying to make money off of this. For decades, it seemed like he was just trying to be left alone about it. I understand that there's like weird things going on with him in his past, but okay. We all have weird things in our past.
We all have our weird shit going on, don't we? Yeah, I know. It's one
and the fact that Knapp takes him so seriously.
He does.
Because I do trust Knapp. I mean, to the extent that anybody can from a distance. Knapp seems legitimate to me.
Yeah, and I'll tell you another one that's in the field that catches a lot of flack, and who I think, and this is my own, and I've had contact with him, but this is my own assessment, is that Stephen Greer may have at the beginning not been completely honest, but as he's gone, I do believe he's had a lot of people talk to him and come out to him and speak to him about this issue. Thereby, he's gone from maybe people didn't trust him to the point where maybe you need to listen to him a little bit more, because I know he's going to have contacts that are coming to him. And there's just no way that they're not coming to him at this point. So some of the stuff that he puts out there is way off the wall for me. Way off the wall, and it's the same with, with some of the stuff that I've talked about. It's way off the wall, and I get it. I understand it. But at the same time, there is a legitimacy now, I think, more so maybe than 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I don't know how long exactly, but, he
I don't know. Greer lives in like a separate place for me.
He does.
Like, I don't understand Greer's deal, really. I agree with you. Like there's absolutely something legitimate there. There's also a lot of just like smoke and mirrors there too. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what's true and what is. I tend to kind of ignore him just because I don't understand him.
Yeah,
and if I don't understand it, there's enough people who I find credible that I'll pay more attention to them.
Yeah, I think we're in that exact same boat. I think there's a part of it that is true and is tacit and is real. He had a thing in recently, a year ago. Maybe not 6 months, whatever, where he had people testifying, and he talked about one of the guys that was talking about, I think it was the Antarctic or Alaska or something, about the energy, whom I found incredibly legitimate. I listened to everything he had to say, and whether he understands it fully or not, I don't know, but seemed very legitimate. And it coincides there are things that seem to make connections with me about that, and that that part of the world is largely untouched, right? It's largely left alone. When you look at the UN Charter for that area of the world, nobody owns it, right? It's supposed to be an area that is for pure research and science. Now, we know that's not always true, right? You're going to have stuff going on under the ice. You're going to have, there's going to be conflict no matter where humans are going to be.
If you can hear me, I lost you again.
Yep. I'm still here.
I got you back.
Okay.
I got you.
So you're going to have, I'll go back up a little bit. So that area of the world is largely supposed to be for the sake of humanity. It's not supposed to be, Russia's or China's or America. It's supposed to be for everybody. And I found his testimony about, the systems that were going up, very credible. I found him to be a very credible guy. So in that respect, Greer has been able to assemble some people that I do listen to, right? But I think I'm on the same hill as you, that it's so hard to understand what the motivation is there, because it doesn't feel like it's totally about disclosure. There seems to be some personal things there that are odd to me. And I've said this from the beginning. I could care less about fame and fortune. I don't care. It's nice to be acknowledged for things that I've put out there, and I've seen lately a lot of stuff that I've talked about and written about that all of a sudden has come out as like, oh, this is this and this. I'm like, okay, maybe just shout back a little bit and say, hey, but that's all right. I don't care.
Steve was on the whole cold laser thing.
I was on this and I had PhDs who were like, you're an idiot. I'm like, I'm not an idiot. I'm telling you, this is what it was. And then all of a sudden China's like, oh, we have this. I'm like, it's like, come on. But yeah, so it is what it is. But my goal is the disclosure of it, is not the fame and the side of that. Like, I don't care about those things. It's not, whatever. It just acknowledge maybe something that says, hey, he talked about this, and then all of a sudden this came up. But that would be nice, but
Well, clearly you're doing good work, and I will acknowledge the good work that you are doing. I will say, for me, though, I agree with you that disclosure, lowercase d, has already happened. For me, it was the Schumer legislation. Like, as soon as I read that, I was like, all right, well, he's just saying this is real.
Right.
And all of that is fascinating to me. I'm far more interested now in the day after disclosure. I'm far more interested in where do we go? Mm-hmm. What are the questions that this raises, and how do we go about answering them, and who's going to answer them? And like, what does this next chapter for humanity look like? That's what's so interesting to me.
I would love the Star Wars version, not the Star Wars. I would like the Star Trek version of that. I don't think that's the case. For whatever reason, I don't think that's the case. That would be nice. I guess a couple of things that I have been told and know about is that's not the case. Now,
oh shit, I lost you.
I don't
again,
know
just
if
as you were getting to the cool
if
part.
you listen to, and I've had this discussion again with, I'll tell you off air, but I've had this discussion with this person that there are not one or two NHI, that there are many NHI.
In the dozens?
In the dozens or more. And that in some way, shape, or form, they have interacted with Earth. How much of that I believe, I would think that there would be more evidence of that. But again, if they're into, and you look at the, if they're traveling through the holographic principle, through interdimensionality, would we even have the capability of seeing it? Could they be sitting and zipping around, and we literally don't have the capability of seeing it because our physics are not there yet? I guess that's possible. That's if you look at the, boy, we're all over the place today. I love this. So if you look at the Drake equation, right? And it's a very complex equation based upon the amount of stars and the amount of planets, and where are they all, right? Where the hell are they? Well, if we look in our three-dimensional world, I think we can apply Drake equation. But if we look in we live in a four-dimensional world. If you put space-time as the fourth dimension, that's what Einstein posited, and I tend to kind of listen to that part of it because he's been really right on just about everything.
I think Einstein's a pretty good source.
Yeah.
I think you can go with Einstein most of the time.
I think we can probably say that he had it down. He had his shit together, right? So, but if you go to the fifth dimension, like there's these thoughts about what does the fifth dimension look like. And mathematically, they can kind of put it together. Like Kevin Knuth is a guy that he's with UAPX. He's with Albany, and he's a PhD, and I've talked to him, and he does a lot of speculation into that arena, right? So what does a fifth dimension possibly look like? And it would be to see everything in the third and the fourth dimension simultaneously, right? It's like, I don't know if you ever followed that famous physics thing, but you can, Flatland, there's a book on it called Flatland, and you can see, you can go this way, there's one dimension, and then you go two, and then you finally get into the third, but you can see everything under you, right? The third dimension can see the second dimension can see the first dimension, and so on. So it's a logical progression. So what would the fifth dimension look like? Well, you'd see everything in a box, basically, is what it looks like. So you could pick up the third dimension, literally pick up pieces of the third dimension, turn it around, look at it, and see it from every single angle all at once, right? So one of the interesting things I discussed with several people over the course of the time was, Drake equation's not going to work as soon as you hit that dimension. It falls apart. Everything falls apart because we don't understand the physics of that realm. And then now, let's say we take fifth dimension. Now let's go above that, right? Now it's pure speculation what the sixth dimension is, right? Because now you're seeing everything in the fifth dimension. So we know that if you're in the fifth dimension, you can manipulate matter in the 3, 2, and 1, right? So if you're now in the sixth dimension and you can manipulate, think about this, you're now able to manipulate the fifth dimension. You're able to manipulate space-time. You're able to manipulate the third dimension, which is what we see every day. 2 and 1. Now, 2 and 1, I think, are probably not as important as you need to get 1 and 2 to get to 3, right? But you don't necessarily have to work in the 1 and 2. So a sixth dimensional being or a sixth dimensional ability would give you the ability to do all of these things. I don't think you need to go much more than the sixth dimension. You now have the ability to manipulate space-time. You have the ability to manipulate wormholes because that's part of space-time. You have the ability to manipulate I guess some people call it teleportation, but it's a portal from place A to point B, right? You have the ability to do that because you can see where they are. You can literally pick up the third dimension, plot through it.
Put it over there.
And go to there, right? All you need is a technology to do that. So if you have a civilization that's been able to get into those dimensions, you have a civilization that's able to manipulate and go through them. So to us, you look at the holographic principle. So if you're up in the fifth dimension and you're moving a ship, right? Just like the third dimension into the second dimension. I know I'm going off the rails here. But if you go look into the third dimension and you look at the second dimension and we have a shadow, so the sun hits us, right? The second dimension would see that shadow moving around, right? But they wouldn't see us. They wouldn't see that third dimension. So it's the same thing with interdimensionality when the craft are moving. So if they stay in a fifth dimension all the time, you're never going to see them. But you will get glimpses of them, right? Because it's going to bleed over into our realm. And mathematically speaking, and I can't do the math, but mathematically speaking, others have done it and can prove mathematically that's the language of the universe, can prove mathematically that this is what can occur. Have we figured all that out, that that's what they're doing? I'm told that to a certain extent, yes, we know that that's part of what's going on. But again, the power requirements to get there, we don't have it. The ability to create all that power in order to open those pathways does not exist for us as humans, or at least in the respect that we haven't been told that we have that. In order to get to Somebody made a comment the other day. I don't remember who it was, but somebody made an interesting comment that if we prove that what do you call it? Anti-gravity exists. We've already proven that there's other dimensions, because technically, in order for anti-gravity to even exist, you have to at least beyond the fourth dimension of time and space, because you're beating gravity. Oh, I know it was Kevin Day was talking about that. He was talking about how the Tic Tacs that they saw went from 20,000 feet down to the ocean in, I think it was like 0.76 seconds, which when Kevin Knuth did the calculations, it's 5,920 Gs from 20,000 feet to the surface of the ocean. And then Kevin was talking about the ability for those things to do it without any sonic boom, which means you're outside of our envelope at that point. And then he talked about how he was able to, and not just him, the entire strike group found all of these Tic Tacs, over 100 of them, and we're talking about 40 foot long by 60 feet around or 30 feet around, whatever it was. Were able to go off radar, and what he believes is that they were entering our ocean 60 nautical miles outside of their area, which was well within their radar range. So he's talking about anti-gravity. So at that point, they're manipulating not only space-time, but they're also manipulating gravity, right? Because they're able to do these things. Because in order for something to go through the air and go by you at more than the speed of sound, you boom, right? We already know that. We see that. We're human beings. We break the sound barrier. So in order for an object to move and not do that, it has to be operating outside of our known physics. It has to. So,
And that's what he said. There were over 100 Tic Tacs?
Yeah. There were over 100 Tic Tacs that they had over like a 6-day period. And they were catching them. So he's not saying this, so he can't get in trouble. They tracked them at 20 to 40 to 60,000 feet. Now, the envelope for us being able to, and mind you, this is 2004, right? So it's 2023 now. So you're talking about old technology considering what we have, right? They were coming from over 80,000 feet in the atmosphere, which is you're getting up above at that point. You're low Earth orbit at 80,000 feet. It's right at that. I can't remember what they call the line there, but whatever. Coming from 80,000 feet down to 20,000 feet, and they were doing that in under a second. From 20,000 feet down to the ocean floor, like 40 feet above the ocean, in another 0.76 seconds. So that drop from 80,000 to 20,000, and they saw at least 100 of these objects do it. Go from that 80,000 foot envelope down to the 20,000 in under 1 second, and then again from 20,000 down to the thing in under a second. So that, if you think about it, that 80,000 to 20,000 is obviously greater than 20,000 to 0 or 40 feet. So if that 20,000 to 40 feet over the ocean, we're talking about 5,900 Gs. You could almost triple that to 15,000 Gs. Tell me any material science on the planet that can do that.
Right.
It would be shredded like anything. I mean, diamond would get shredded. Think about it. I mean, it's on the Mohs scale, diamond's the hardest thing, but it would literally rip apart the very atoms of the diamond that did it. I know we're not building.
So did he speculate on how they're doing it?
He doesn't know how they're doing it. Other than from a human point of view, the only way that it can be done is that they are manipulating anti-gravity. They have to be.
The way that I can conceptualize this is through like the Einstein-Rosenberg bridge, whatever. So you're sort of bending paper and you're going from here to here. Okay. Then you're there. But what they're seeing is the actual travel.
Reverse.
They're seeing these things actually moving.
They're seeing them, and there is data that was pulled off the ships, all of the ships, that show it. And it's not just Kevin that saw it. We're talking about like 25 or 30 radar operators. I mean, we're talking about the best
on multiple ships.
On multiple ships.
Right. So it's not like one radar system is fritzed out.
Yeah, this was not. This was everybody. So consider that. I mean, the explosiveness of that, but the problem is that it was shut down. It was brought, all that data is gone. And one of the things I said to him, I asked him specifically, I said, how many times, now he was, 15, 16, 18 years, whatever it was that he was in the military, and Top Gun radar operator, right? Best of the best. I asked him, of all the floats that you did, and he's been in wars, he's been all over the world. I said, in all of those times, how many times had somebody ever come on board and taken the data that you had just gotten? He said, it never happened. And the reason why is because we have to use that data for reporting. The following day, I'm sending emails here or there and saying, okay, so X happened here, B happened here, C happened here. And you have to write your reports based upon that data, and you have to refer back to that. They don't take data off ships. That does not happen. It just does not ever happen. He said within hours of that occurring, the next morning they were on ship and they had everything gone.
Do you know who they were?
Yes. I can't get him to acknowledge me anymore. But Peter Bythrow was the chief scientist for basically the intelligence arm of gathering information. So his job was to not only observe and to look at the specific data, but he also works within the realm of signature physics. So his job was to, at the time, any type of it wasn't just anomalous data, but this was under his umbrella. Anytime he had anomalous data, he would take that data, disseminate it, figure out what was going on with it. Now, he started talking to me very early on, and then when I started getting a little deeper, he ghosted. Since then, I've had a couple other people, big names, reach out, and he has now shut off his emails. His phone number is now disconnected, and he will not speak. I know the name is there. I know who he is. I know what he did. I know what his job was. Peter, and I told him his name was going to go out there. And I tried early on to get him on my side. Friendly discussions, and either somebody got to him or he just decided that this wasn't worth coming out and talking about. Which is sad, because I believe that he has an incredible amount of knowledge about these programs, specifically legacy programs. So I'm a little dismayed at that, but it is what it is. I mean, I know who did it. And I did share that information with some people that were in that specific incident that have tried to reach out to him as well. So I know where it is. I know where it went. I also know that there are very high quality videos of that encounter, not FLIR, but actual cockpit video.
How could there not be?
Yeah, there is. It's all out there. Well, it's not out there. It's all there.
No, it's there.
It's there. In fact, and this is one of the things that I haven't put this out there, but I put part of this out there. I believe, and the reason why I went to kind of try to talk to Peter was that I believe Peter either leaked it to Lou, those 3 videos, or had it leaked to Lou. I can't confirm that. All right, that is it's based upon a conversation that I had with somebody else that said that was how it went down. So I can't say it as fact. I know Peter Bythrow can come after all while he wants. He's the guy. He's the guy that locked down Nimitz. I have no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's the guy that locked down the Nimitz encounter. Whether he was told to lock it down, I don't know. But he was the guy that locked it down. And he was the guy that subsequently, I believe, in what I was told, like I said, leaked those videos. So maybe it comes out later on that is absolutely 100% true. I'm trying to get confirmation on that to a certain extent, but I have yet to.
There's going to be a hell of a story to tell about this period from 2017 until whenever that kind of big D disclosure happens.
It is.
That's a hell of a story.
It's not only a hell of a story, but there's people fighting it, right? There's active fighting going on. And Tim Burchett, he put it out there. He said it's money and power. And the first thing I thought of was he's probably right. But I don't think it's that simple.
I don't think it is either.
No, I think and I actually, regardless of politics, because I believe that this is a humanity issue, right? I don't care what color you are, what orientation you are. I don't care where you live. I don't care if you vote blue or red or somewhere in the spectrum. I don't care. Every person has a right to know where they are, where they came from, and where they're going. Period. Hard stop. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. So, though I don't agree with all of his politics, I do like his tenacity. And speaking of Tim here, I do like the tenacity he shows about this. I like, Moskowitz is another one who's obviously a very liberal person who also is on this, right? So you can see that this issue really look at Schumer. I mean, Schumer and Burchett couldn't be as far away from each other ideologically as you could be. Same with AOC, right? And
Matt Gaetz at that hearing,
right? Could not be further apart, right? Yet there is one thing that brings them together, and it's this topic. And you have to ask yourself, well, why is it? And I want to believe it isn't because they want to be in front of the camera. I could be naive in that. But I don't see, especially with Schumer, I don't see an end game with that. Makes no sense to me. He doesn't need it in any way, shape, or form.
No, the opposite.
Right.
It's the exact opposite.
Right.
There's as I said earlier, there's no reason for him to do this. It can only damage him politically unless he knows something we don't know, which is that disclosure is coming.
That disclosure is coming. And, there's been some speculation.
And he's trying to set the table for it.
Yeah. And
he's just trying to make it happen.
Yeah. You talked about, whether it could be something against our adversaries. And yeah, it could. I'm hoping that's not it. I'm really hoping that's not it. So anyway, we've had quite the conversation here.
We have.
Any final thoughts?
Something that you talked about earlier that just has always stuck with me since 2017 when that article came out. You said something to the effect of, people aren't like, why isn't this on every television station? Why isn't every mainstream journalist covering this story? And I think the longer I'm exposed to this, I do think there is something, I don't know if it's in the majority of the population or what, but there is something about this topic that just shuts people's brains down. I don't think it's as simple as the CIA in 1952 going, we're just going to make fun of people.
Right.
There's something else going on. I'm basing that partly on personal experience. I'll tell you the quick story. The only time I ever saw a UFO, I was 16 or 17 years old. I was coming back from the movies with my girlfriend at the time and my best friend. We were in a car. We were driving through the woods. We looked up. We saw... My memory of it is a little bit hazy now, but in my memory, it's a sort of classic orange kind of fireball, sort of moving across the sky silently. I thought there must be a plane crashing. We tried to follow it, but we were in the woods. We couldn't, it was over trees. We couldn't, right? Next morning, I get up. I look in the local paper. Was there a plane crash? Nothing. Okay. I don't know what I saw, but I saw something. Here's the point. My friends and I never talked about it. Never talked about it once, even though it was this bizarre thing that we saw. Maybe a year or so ago, maybe 2 years ago, I contacted my girlfriend at the time and I said, do you remember this? And I knew she was going to say no. And she said no. She had no memory of this. So there's one of two things happening. Either it's a memory that I invented, very specific, and involved me going downstairs the next day and looking in the paper. Did that not happen?
Right.
Or there's some sort of tamping down effect that people experience when they observe an anomalous object. And that seems, my inclination is to believe that, because I feel like that's a well sort of documented phenomena that people, when confronted with something they don't understand, sometimes just tune it out and shut it off. And I tend to believe that's kind of what's going on globally with this story, that for most people, it just sort of goes in through one ear and out the other. They don't see how it affects their lives on a daily basis. They don't know what to believe. It's such a big topic to get your head around. I think most people would rather just click off. That to me has been super fascinating to observe. The kind of, I don't see it, I don't hear it, it matters not to me at all. That's been amazing to me.
Yeah, and as much as I love, love my wife, and she's probably going to slap me when she hears me, she's in the other room. She doesn't want anything to do with this.
My wife too. She doesn't care.
Doesn't want anything to do with it in any way, shape, or form, and that's fine. I do try and push it on her sometimes, and she's like, "Knock it off." But yeah,
the first time I got my wife interested, I was out for lunch with Dave Foley, who I don't know if you know, he's a comedian from the Kids in the Hall.
Yep.
Big UFO guy. We were out for lunch, and we were sort of double teaming my wife on this topic to sort of get her interested. And she was like, yeah, that's all really interesting. That's all really interesting. Check. It's like,
shut up now.
It doesn't.
Yeah. It's one of those, like, I love you, honey, but I'm not crazy.
Right.
Yeah. But it's, yeah, she says that remains to be seen. It's one of those things that I don't want to say people are simple, because that's not right. I know that's not the right thing to say, but it comes.
I think it either just speaks to you or it doesn't.
I think so.
And for people like us, we don't understand why it doesn't speak to everybody,
right,
because it speaks so deeply to us.
Right. And not.
I don't think it's a question of people being simple or not simple. I think there's just, I don't know, there's like a gene I have that makes me have to go down this road.
Well, I was one of those kids that I always said, why?
Yep.
My parents would be driven insane. I was always, why? And like, okay, go play with the birds outside for a little while. But, it's a natural curiosity that I have. Mm-hmm. And it's not just a natural curiosity. To me, it's deeper than that. It's a
fundamental question. It speaks to who we are.
It does. To me personally.
It's very, very deep. Yeah.
It is. I just turned 50, and I've noticed that in my life as I've gone along, and I can look back in the past at things that I believed in or I thought were real, are not the same things that I think are real and believe in today at 50. It's not the same. I believe that I have evolved my thought processes over time. And along with that, and I'm not a spiritual person in any way, shape, or form. I'm more of a humanist person, meaning I want to know about the human condition and the involvement of the whys and the hows across. And I like looking at it from pretty much any perspective, whether you're a tribe in Papua New Guinea or a billionaire. I want to know the thought processes that are going on. It intrigues me. It makes me think. And it keeps my mind, from getting moss on it. So for me personally, it is too about that. Though the physics of it and the objects really excite me, because I love thinking about those things. Like, I like thinking about things that are completely outside of our thought processes of what our world is and our physics. And the fact that we haven't discovered 90% of our ocean boggles my mind. Like, we know more about the moon than we do about our own oceans, right? And that,
we don't understand 90+% of what makes up our universe.
Right. And some of that, and some of that too, one of the things that I had thought about that, and I won't call out any physicists, but, there's one in particular that is kind of completely and totally away from the alien hypothesis in any way, shape, or form.
I think I know the physicist of whom you speak.
I am certain.
And whom I have great admiration for and enjoy.
Yes. And that the thing of it is, it's like, are you doing it out of ego, or are you doing it because if it's right
I don't know. Like, that one bugs me a little bit because to me, right, a scientist has to question everything, right? And we don't have all the answers, and we can't make those answers. So for that, I was like, that one surprised me because I'll be honest with you, I've been listening to those podcasts and listening and showing my kids as they were growing up, trying to teach them about these things. And I was like, that one kind of pissed me off, I'll be honest. I was kind of like, I'm like, why did you do that? Like, I've gone to your seminars before. Like, I've seen you live, and I'm like, I was like, what is going on?
But I agree with you. Like, it's annoying to me. At the same time, we need those people. We need Mick West. We need Mick Wests. We need
I can't.
Neil deGrasse Tyson's. We need everybody because, and excuse me for saying his name, but we need him. We need him the same way that the Republicans need the Democrats and the Democrats need the Republicans. It's that same thing. You have to have these contradictions. You have to have conflict. In those tensions is where we unearth stuff. As long as people are entering it into in good faith. And I think in Tyson's case, I think it is good faith. Maybe not so much with West, but I think he provides a service. We need that. You need, like, every presupposition you have has to be challenged in this field. It has to be.
I do agree with that.
And you need somebody pushing back hard. And if your evidence stands up to that, great. That's what you need. And if it doesn't, great. You need that too. I do think that he is ignoring some evidence, some powerful evidence.
Agreed.
But okay. Like, I can live with that. I can live with it as long as I believe that he is in good faith looking at this topic, and he has been dismissive. That being said, I also think the door has cracked open a little bit with him. I'm basing that on that kind of contentious interview he did on Theory of Everything, where it seemed like, he wasn't shutting the door. I felt like actually the door opened up a little bit. It's okay. I mean, I think it's okay. I respect him a lot. And as long as he's open to the questions, great.
Before we go, I did want to get your thoughts on one thing. So you saw the NASA report that came out, right? And you
which one? There was that first thing that Kirkpatrick hosted.
No,
I don't know that I saw it.
So this was Bill Nelson came out and talked about.
Oh yeah.
What did you think about his comments with Grush? Did you hear that?
So again, we're talking about reading between the lines.
Right.
It seemed really interesting to me because it sounded like the Grush thing was weird. Like, he was being very dismissive of Grush in a way that I didn't quite understand. I didn't understand at all.
You're right.
Because he was mischaracterizing everything that Grush had testified to. He was saying, he heard it from some guys and then told the inspector general. It sounded like he was hanging out at, Hooters or something, right, and somebody said something, when that wasn't at all the case. That I was like, I don't know where this is coming from. It's weird. That being said, if we agree that Grush was a black swan, then maybe I can understand it a little bit because of other comments he made where it sounded very much like he was trying to very subtly say, this is real. Like, I'm trying to set the table for disclosure here. But I can't yet. It sounded to me from other comments that he was making, like we're trying to get this out there. We don't have the data yet. We're not able to. But it sounded like what he was saying is, but my personal opinion is, this is real. That's how I interpreted his other comments. His Grush comments, if we agree that Grush is a black swan, it may be more useful for him to dismiss Grush because Grush is fucking up the timetable.
Right.
Or Grush is fucking up whatever they're trying to do. So if I can just sort of put that to the side, then maybe I'm cool with what Nelson was saying. I don't know.
And I think we agree that Grush is a black swan. He came out of the woodwork. I don't honestly believe that was part of the agenda of moving disclosure forward. It just happened to be that this guy who
took it on himself.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't getting support.
Yeah, he wasn't getting support. And, he admittedly has autism. And I've got, I have some friends that I know have autism, and I have a family member that I think is undiagnosed but has autism. And in their world, in their worldview, everything is black or white. There's very little gray area. So, to his credit, and to his intelligence, because his mind works that way, I believe for him personally, it was a matter of, I need to get this out there. Like, I can't live with this. Like, I can't, it can't sit in my soul. He's that type of person. Like, it can't sit here and me know all this and not be able to come out. And I think he's certainly very, very careful about how he speaks, and he's very careful about what he reveals. And that's kind of the juxtaposition that I have with Lou, right? Where Lou, who has been very careful as well, I think Lou has shared more from the, I don't want to say a disclosure side. I want to say it more along the lines of like the be prepared line. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's more along the lines of saying, I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is right this second, but you kind of need to be prepared for what's coming, right? That's more along the lines of what I get from Lou, as opposed to what I get from Grush. What I get from Grush is the United States has these programs. There's a lot of other things going on, and Lou seems more of cerebral, maybe more about the.
I think he's looking at it more holistically.
Right.
Like, Grush had a job to do. Grush was tasked with finding this out. He found it out. He wasn't get support. He said, fuck this, I'm going public.
Right.
I understand that, but that's a kind of narrow field of vision. I get the sense from Elizondo that he has a more holistic view of this from a national security point of view, from, a philosophical, theological point of view.
Right.
I think he's looking at it in a more, 5D perspective, understanding that, he talks about breadcrumbs, understanding that the public is going to have to pick up the breadcrumbs and go piece by piece by piece, as opposed to Grush just going, we got him.
Yeah.
Like, just throwing it all out there.
Right.
You can understand why. And do you know what the relationship right now is between Elizondo and Grush? Like, Grush joined the Soul Foundation, right?
Foundation,
and
yeah.
Isn't Elizondo involved with that?
To my knowledge, no.
Okay.
But I wouldn't, and I can't categorically say this because I've had, to my knowledge, I got to be careful how I say this. To my knowledge, Grush and Lou have had no or very little contact. To my knowledge.
Interesting.
To my knowledge. I can't really go any more than that. I could tell you off air, but I can't really go more into that. What I do know is that, like I said there, and this was partially my feeling, is that they've had two different point of views, but at the same time, all on that same level of disclosure. Right?
Yeah, leading to the same place.
Leading to the same place, doing it a different way, but getting there together, or at least to some extent. I don't want to say corroborating, but maybe just like you and I, we have two different two different outlooks on how we look at things. Yours is more towards the consciousness end of it, where mine is more towards the the tech end of it. So I think there's things going on there that they're certainly, as you say, Lou has a much more holistic view of things, and I certainly believe that there's continuity. How's that? There's continuity to what's going on there, and I think that is a good thing. I think that there are some bad actors in this field. I'm not naming any names, but I do think that there are some people in this field that are doing it specifically for clout, specifically for I look at me. And like I said, when we discussed a little bit earlier, I don't care about the fame part of it. I do care about occasionally getting a little bit of credit here or there. That's fine. That would be nice. But at the end of the day, my my goal is that initial, or like I said, I think the initial has already been out there, but that big disclosure, as in, listen, everybody, it's real. This is this. We don't know exactly all of it. So over the next 5 years, 10 years, we're going to be bringing you more, right? We're going to tell you as we get it. I want to get to that point. I want to get to that point where I can talk to my wife and say, you know, here it is. This is just, it's there. Okay. Your president just came on TV and told you, or whatever, how it looks. We need to get to that point. And once we've gotten to that point, I believe the rest, like I've said it before, it's details. It's all details. It's just filling in the blanks over the years. What has occurred? What has not occurred? I was told Roswell was not us. Was not NHI. It was, in fact, us that blew our own stuff up that we were trying to work on from NHI, from reverse engineering, is that we didn't know what the hell we were doing. And when we tried to engage or do whatever it was that we were doing, it went kaboom. But it came from that line. So it wasn't little gray, little green, whatever you want to call it. It wasn't. It was humans that blew themselves up. Is that true? I don't know. Again, that was part of the article. I don't know the truth behind it. I don't know that it's 100% true. I can only tell you what was told to me, and it kind of made a lot of sense. Like, I was like, all right, that actually makes sense that we're trying.
Well, it kind of supports what Grush was saying, right? Yeah. I mean, if it was 1947, was it?
7.
So if they found that thing in Italy in the 30s, it's possible we were working on it for 10 years. Got to the point where we did with Roswell, crashed the thing.
And then turned it on and went boom. You know, and it makes sense because you think about the 40s, crying out loud, we barely had, I don't even think we had bubble wrap yet. You know, I mean, it's like, you know, we weren't there yet. You know, we had some brilliant minds, don't get me wrong. You know, you just go back to our friend Einstein. We had some brilliant minds out there, but our materials tech wasn't there, right? It was, we were still flying around. Why is my nose so runny tonight? We were still flying around with propellers, right? It wasn't.
Yep.
You know, so I don't know. I mean, it makes sense from the point of view of timeline. It made sense, but it also makes sense from a materials point of view. If we were trying to plug something in to something that we thought we knew, and then turned it on and it went boom, that makes sense. You know, like,
it does.
So, and I don't know. I don't know. I can just say that it makes sense from where I heard it from.
Certainly doesn't make any less sense than anything else.
It doesn't.
Because none of it makes any sense.
None of it makes sense.
Which is also part of the joy of it.
Yes, it is. And it's a fun subject to dive into. And I enjoy the hell out of it. It's a fun little, it gets to the thought experiment, the thinker's going. I'll tell you, it gets the synapses burning a little bit.
It sure does.
I love it. So.
Me too.
I'm hoping that very soon we're going to have that big disclosure, though. That's what I'm hoping for.
I would love it. I kind of doubt it's ever going to happen, but I would love it.
Don't say that. It's going to happen. We have to be. Right. We have to be happy and Anyway, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Hey, the pleasure was mine. Thanks for inviting me on. This was great.
Absolutely. I'd love to have you again someday as well soon.
Anytime.
And so for everybody that's out there, we had a technical thing in the middle of this thing where I had to turn my laptop, for some reason, just decided to stop functioning. So, and put a Windows update on. I got to turn that off. But I have auto updates on, and it was like, oh, we're going to do this now. Like, okay.
Yeah. You're like, bad time. It's a kind of a bad time.
Yeah, it's kind of a bad time, but, you know. I fight technology on a daily basis. That's all I can say. We all do. It never works functionally for me. So,
well, hopefully the aliens have better tech. That's all we can hope.
Anyway, all right. So, thank you very much. Do you have anything you want to talk about?
Nah.
You sure?
We talked about a lot of shit. Come see me on tour. I'm touring with The State, which is my sketch comedy group, or you can go see me do stand up.
You coming up here to Boston?
Yes, actually.
When?
On let me look at my calendar. November 10th and 11th.
I'm coming up to see you.
In Beverly, Massachusetts.
All right. Mark it. I'm coming to see you.
Great. Come on by.
Awesome. Can't wait to see you.
Can't wait to meet you in person.
All right. Have a good one. Take care.
Thanks, Steve.
Don't do
You
anything
too.
I wouldn't do.
I'm not sure what you would do or you wouldn't do. It seems like you would do a lot.
I'm a troublemaker.
Yeah, I feel like you might be.
All right. Take it easy, Michael. Thank you very
You
much.
too. Take care.
Bye-bye.